let us speak about Idealliance. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with who Idealliance are, but Idealliance is a non-profit organization. It's a think tank that serves the global print and packaging industry. We do our work through ISO standards innovation, print and digital workflows, technical research and development, and a big part of what we do in Europe, of course, is certification and training. As you mentioned, Ivana, our European office is based in Madrid, Spain, and it was established in 2018. Now, Idealliance has 12 offices spread across the world. This gives our organization, our brand, print production, and OEM partners leverage and reach across the globe. G7, I've often heard it referred to as the American standard in the past, but I think every series print professional would agree now that it is in fact the global standard. When I work myself with one of our brand partners, they can seamlessly work with one of my colleagues in any of these countries you see on the screen. We are going to speak about the trainings that we did in 2019 and will continue to do in 2020 after the situation has passed. But we have an unbelievable amount of training across the globe in India, Vietnam, Korea in particular. Latin America is a very big market for us now. And of course, the USA was always the largest market for us. All of our offices live by the same mantra. We are here to serve the industry in every way we can. We do this by training color professionals, brand professionals, a lot of the people that are on this webinar, scholarships through our Idealliance Foundation, and we have an amazing program called the Higher Education Program that is for universities with large graphic departments. So we really set out to do as much as we can for the global sector. So without education, there be no innovation. So you can see in this illustration how we work with ISO through our working groups. We are a liaison aid to ISO and recognized by this organization as the largest certified body in the world. We will see in the next two slides the level of innovation that comes from the Idealliance working groups, but I have to get across it's just as important to educate professionals in the sector about these innovations. It's something that was lacking in the past, and it is really the top of our agenda. Education is hugely important, and it is where Idealliance excels. So, for those of you who aren't aware of this group, this is our main group that deals with print and packaging. It's the Print Properties and Colorimetric Council. A lot of the ISO standards are born here. We have great minds from the sector from across the globe participating in this group. We meet via internet every month. We share ideas, innovations, and expertise. The common goal is to create standards to further the industry. I can tell you that some of the people who are involved in this are at the very top of the food chain when it comes to creating these incredible standards for everybody to use in the industry. Here we have a snapshot of some of the ISO standards that were born out of Idealliance. These are many more, and we have many more in development, but I'd like to bring everybody to the sentence that's highlighted in blue. So G7 is currently being revised into ISO 12647-2. This was a CIB vote in December 2018 with a 99% approval. So to put it bluntly, this vote is a game changer and long overdue. It means that G7 Lean Neutral will soon be incorporated into ISO 12647-2 with the same status as TVI. So all of the standards born out of our PPC group are G7 based, and now this standard will align appearance and will work across all print technologies, and this will massively reduce supply chain miscommunication and definitely propel the industry forward. So, our live training. So, I told you that we were established the European office in 2018. We had some training events, some private training events with brands and some large print supply chains, or suppliers, I should say. But in 2019, let us speak, we had about the 6 live training and certification events. 5 of these were G7 Expert, 1 BrandQ Expert. We'll speak about BrandQ later on in the presentation. These are 3-day intensive courses, and after the attendee finishes an online exam, they become G7 experts or professionals. There's a slight difference in that certification. They've been hosted in 5 countries, twice in Antwerp, and we've had attendees over this time from 14 different European countries. Now, these attendees range from ink experts to freelance color experts, brand professionals, press professionals. So it's a wonderful environment, a wonderful learning environment. And for each of these trainings, we fly over a G7 expert lead trainer. Now, we usually fly these guys in from the United States because they have so much experience in teaching this certification course, and they're all exceptional professionals and exceptional men. So I can't underestimate the success of these events. Just to look that we have over 90 certified G7 experts speaks for itself. I myself, as managing director, I'm in constant contact with these guys, and they're all exceptional professionals. You see here highlighted in blue that we have two similar G7 expert events confirmed for this year in Sweden and Turkey in October and November. But the situation we're all in, these have been confirmed. We have filled most of the spaces. We were actually in 2020, we've up to now postponed 8 of these trainings, but this is a small problem compared to what everybody's going through at the moment. But what I want to get across to everybody in the webinar, those of you that would like to partake in the G7 expert or professional live training, our idea is to host in the UK, France, and generally across the globe. And I hope also in Serbia at some stage. So everybody has the opportunity to work with Idealliance and certify as a G7 expert. Now that you have a good idea about the organization and how we work serving the industry, let's touch on the G7 method and how it differs from the traditional TVI calibration. So, the traditional method is a calibration. It's based on dot gain using the CMYK ink ramps. This is calibrating 4 different channels. Of course, this method can be used on 7, 8, even 11 different channels. But when we speak about G7, we are speaking about CMYK. The typical way to do this calibration is to print, go into your rip curves, adjust where needed, and we come out matching ISO 12647 curves. There are certain limitations in that TVI does not control tonality, as dot gain does not equal a certain weight. But of course, there's a caveat there because TVI actually looks very well in the litho world. It was born from the litho world, as was G7, but it is measured using densitometry, whereas we learn later the measurements for G7 are colorimetric. So we have both patches here have the same TVI but different tonality. It's a 50% patch with 20% TVI. We know that the equation for TVI is based on the solid. There's a ratio between the maximum density and the screen percentage. So if we print darker, our 50% patch will be darker. If we print lighter, again, the 50% patch will be lighter. It doesn't control tonality. Now, the big takeaway here is that TVI is a ratio of reflectance, not a direct indicator of appearance. This is hugely important when we speak about the difference between G7 and TVI. To measure using densitometry has such obvious limitations. For this reason, we use TVI measurements in G7 calibrations as a baseline to return to if the color drifts. So if I may, I'll give you an example. If we were to calibrate a 4-color Heidelberg press to G7 before the calibration, we need to stabilize that system. So it is vitally important that we know the TVI, we get it as close to ISO as we possibly can, but it is so important that we record the TVI so we can go back to that baseline when the color drifts. And all of us in this industry know that the color will drift, whether it's a litho press, flexo, digital. So again, the takeaway, it's a ratio of reflectance. And here we are looking at TVI, that it doesn't control gray balance. Again, both patches have same TVI. So we're looking at a cyan 16%, magenta 16, yellow 16. But we have a very definite green color cast on one of the patches. So this, sorry, I'm getting some interference. This ratio, when we look at this, it's the ratio of reflectance method leads us to the same phenomena in regard to gray balance, what we spoke about with the tonality. Again, TVI and the way it's measured is not a reflection of appearance. So, why not? Well, let's look at the other variables. So, all these factors that you see on the screen affect the outcome. Even with the correct solid ink density and depth gain, we can still have this color cast that is going to completely shift the color when we're on press. Now, I can share with you that I myself, in my younger days, in my own life, I worked on, when I entered the industry, I worked on Heidelbergs and Commodities for many years as a pressman. And I can tell you that when you print a TVI, absolutely, it's a calibration that will help you. But if your chemistry is wrong, your sequence is wrong, your ink set is off, the trapping is wrong, you will get a color shift. And this is why we go to G7. But let's look at a TVI calibration. You can see here, this is a TVI calibration without using ICC color management. So we're looking at a digital inkjet and offset device, all of them in their raw state. So we might expect this without any calibration. This is what we're going to see, particularly in the inkjet and with very much saturation. So the offset isn't bad. It's still in the heavy, in the saturation. We've achieved a reasonable gray balance, and the colors have been corrected. But what to take away here is the near neutrals are completely off. What we don't have is a common appearance across these different devices. This is hugely important. If we were to print on different substrates also, this problem would be magnified. So the big takeaway, TVI is not the only variable affecting gray balance, and gray balance is hugely important to consistent printing. So as I said, it can work very well sometimes on litho in the correct conditions with an experienced pressman and a good press, but there are so many variables that will affect this. So let's look at the G7 method. Here you can see some of the main points of G7. So let's look at its identical calibration for all technologies. It defines a universal common appearance. This is by calibrating tonality and gray balance colorimetrically. What isn't here, and maybe we can touch on in another webinar when we're more technically specific, is an integral part of G7 is that it is substrate relative, meaning that we adjust the gray in relation to the white point of the paper. And this is something we can touch on in the future, but it is really important that it's understood that we have a set gray balance number that we must reach. So if the paper is heavy with OBAs, or it's a yellow cast paper, using the G7 method, you can overcome this problem. So how is G7 different? We calibrate using two scales. While we use TVI to control While using TVI to control the gray, we are not interested in the individual TVI of each ramp. So here you see two ramps that we use to create gray balance. We have a CMY and a K ramp. What's important to us is the result of all three printed together, that is the CMY. The way the formula works is that the calculation is dynamic, meaning it depends on the white point of the paper and the density of the CMY overprint and the density of the black solid. Consistent totality and gray balance. The idea is to create curves so the CMY ramp to control the gray balance and the black ramp to control the tonality. Again, the dot gain does not matter to the final result. The white point of the paper and the targeted gray balance lab value are the most important here. We physically adjust the curves in the same way, but using a different method. Now, where do we get the required dot gain values to create the correct curves? What you are looking at here is from the old days, certainly before my time when I was with Idealliance or the G7 Expert. But this is a graph that we use for demonstration purposes. But luckily, nearly every color management software ships now with G7 capability. So for those of you who would like to become a G7 expert, don't fret. You will never have to use this graph. On the right, you can see a scale showing devices of large maximum densities. If you look to the top, we have like a 190 density, which will be an inkjet all the way down to a newsprint. Once we have the maximum density of a device, we can create balanced curves to be entered into the RIP, making sure that we can achieve a similar appearance in the highlight and midtones. Now, this is hugely important. I'm gonna come back to this now in just one moment, because what's important here is how a big part of what we do with G7 and what G7 does for us is it creates a common appearance across different technologies and substrates. This is based on the chromatic adaptation principle in regard to a substrate's white point. So if I can give you the elevator pitch on this, when we look at a printed sheet, our eyes automatically go to the white point of the printed sheet. This is it's a human reaction. So the color cast, if a sheet has a lot of OBAs, is very blue, the whole color will shift. Again, it's a yellow. The yellow cast will affect all of the color. Using G7 calibration, we can control the highlight and midtones. If you look at the 50% here, it's more or less the same. This line, this black line, is actually Gurakkon. So it's more or less the same. It does tail off on newsprint and what have you. But we get this common appearance here in the highlight and midtones. This is hugely important. In our method, in the algorithm, we have a weighted algorithm that is less punishing to the saturated areas. So again, this is a very quick overview, and it's an archaic graph, but I hope some of you color professionals have taken that in, at least in regard to the highlight and midtones. And this is where we end up. Again, a calibration, just correcting the curves without ICC color management, the raw state, and this is where we arrive. The color has been corrected, but the most important take in here is the near neutral, the common appearance across the grays from different devices. The values are entered in the same place in the RIP, but we are just using a different method and measuring colorimetrically to achieve faster and better results. So now that we've touched on G7, and absolutely that is maybe the quickest overview I've ever given, but hopefully I'll have an opportunity to speak to you again and more technically in the future in another webinar. I want to touch on our BrandQ program. It's important that to give you the full picture of why we are having such success in Europe. A lot of this is driven by the brand. So our Idealliance BrandQ program was released in 2018 and is now an ISO process standard. So the main bullet points, it improves quality, efficiency, and speed to market. How? Because this program is aimed at the brands themselves. We have what we've done many private trainings with some of the largest brands in the world where we teach their print buyers more, although these are professionals and they understand printing, but we teach them more about spectrophotometry, more about what their print supply chain is doing. We create a language that both can speak. This leads to reduced costs in media production across its supply chain. So if I can very briefly say, if you are designing, your designers are designing to Graco, and your printers who are G7 masters are printing to Graco, then anybody in the printing trade would understand with the limited conversions, the ease. We try to make the journey of a digital file that much easier without human intervention. And of course, very importantly, provide quality validation based on industry standards and best practices. So what this means is that the people who go through a BrandQ course can understand when a contract proof is correct, ready to go to print. Moreover, they can speak to their printer in a much more professional way, and they can measure the output and understand that it's within tolerance or out of tolerance. Now, in a global market where one specific brand that we work with that is one of the top 5 brands in the world, they employ the system. They're the BrandQ company, and all of the printers are G7 masters. They can control the color quality of their whole supply chain from China to Chicago, from Madrid to London and beyond. And this is simply, we have used standardization to teach the brands the power of using standards because they are there for us all to use. And we've taught the printers that actually their life is easier if they invest in some training for their staff to learn more about standardization. Now, why G7 for brands, print buyers, and creatives? Just an overview before we finish. It's important to realize that G7 is the backbone of everything we do, because I gave you a brief outline of the benefits of G7. It's important to the brands because color is so important. It's the way people embrace their brand. You see here that it's one of the most emotional attributes for a client when they see a brand. We've all had that experience of seeing something on a shelf, and if it's packaging that the color is off as it goes down the shelf, you get the impression that, well, something's not right here. Now, you might think I'm exaggerating there, but there's been many studies done on this. Hence, we are working with some of the top brands in the world to make sure this isn't a problem for them going forward. Efficiency. As I've alluded to before, reduce design times, reduce costs of proofing and shipping prior to print. Reduce need, which is quite important in the situation we're in now, reduce need for on-site press checks and travel. And other tasks based on visual approval methods. Now, I think we all know that everybody sees color differently. And what we've tried to do here is take away of the phenomena of designing on press. So if I just give you an example, a very capable professional from a brand takes 3 days travel to visit a printer, to pass on press using visual attributes to see until they're happy, and then we go to production. Now, even before this awful situation fell upon us, the brands we are working with We are essentially eliminating on-site press checks for these brands, which is hugely important to them. It's a huge expense, but actually the loss of manpower from people from your departments who have to travel, it's something that we've sat down, we've spoken to the brands about, and absolutely this is high on our list. And another very important thing in efficiency is higher consistency in reprints. As I told you guys earlier that I was a printer in my past life, and when you're a press man and your shift manager comes to you, well, this is 20 years ago, comes to me and he says, Alan, I want you to reproduce this job that you printed 4 months ago. Well, that's the hardest thing for a printer to reproduce. So, but if we're designing to Grackle and we're printing to Grackle, we know the tolerances, we have set parameters in place how to use spectrophotometry, we have trends in place, there's great data exchange, this problem goes away. Communication, as I just mentioned there, data exchange is hugely important for assessing your supply chain performance also. So there's so many opportunities now, there's so many companies that offer brands an opportunity, software to create trending, to see exactly who the high performers are in their supply chain. Communication leads to clear expectations for your partners in regarding accepting work. It's important that when a printer ships work, and we're in the packaging industry, this could be many hundreds of thousands of euros on one print run. It's very, very important that the brand manager knows what's being printed and has received the data and is able to give the go-ahead to ship. We have brands, our brand partners are using this method now. I'm not saying it's easy to bring into a workflow. There's always challenges from inside and out, but this is essentially what BrandQ does for our brand partners. And we are here to speak about Idealliance, but most of you will be familiar with G7. G7 is the backbone of this program. And of course, an overall increase in consistency, efficiency, and that very important word, savings. So, to finish the presentation about Idealliance itself, I want to just have another couple of slides because to point you in the direction of a lot of free materials that we make available to the sector. What gets measured gets managed. So this encapsulates everything that we try to do, from our G7, from the way we consult with the brands, the way we during our training with the BrandQ people. This is the mantra, and it's easily done. It's long overdue in our industry. Now, of course, there are companies and brands that have been using this mantra for many years, but a very small percentage. So what Idealliance is doing and what we will do, we're doing around the globe, we are doing in Europe, we are growing rapidly, is essentially to encapsulate this. So before I go, our online training and certification, many of you will be familiar with, I'd imagine, our CNP Professional Master Online. Now, we also have a print planning. This is a new course, print planning and estimating. This is actually nothing to do with color. This is something we produced once we wanted to create a higher education program for universities. We wanted to create a program for students to also understand the mechanics behind what goes on in a printing environment. We also have BrandQ Expert and Manager and a G7 Process Control Expert online. Now, to complete the G7 Process Control, you already have to be a G7 expert. But I have to let you guys know that in the present situation, we have absolutely, because there is a cost to these certifications. Everybody who completes these receives a certificate. We have slashed the pricing of this because of the present. We understand a lot of people are working from home, and some of the pricing on these courses has been slashed up to 80%. So I don't want to give you a sales pitch, but I want to let you know what's available to you guys for people who want to move forward, learn more about standardization, G7, and well, everything else we have to offer. So anybody who's interested in this can contact me directly. So this guide to print production is a publication that we release every 4 years, I believe, maybe every 5 years. It's an exceptional document. Now, actually, this new document was just published in November. Now, in the past, there's been quite a heavy cost to print professionals to buy this document online, but we are giving, again, in the present situation, this is free to download for everyone on this webinar. And anybody who would like this document, I can tell you it's got fantastic content, standardization, some technical details. Everything you need to know about current trends is in this document. So anybody, I'm going to give you my details now on the final slide. Anybody who would like to have this copy, contact me directly, and I will have my colleagues in the USA contact you with a free copy. And to finish. So again, here you have my email address, and I want to get across one of the main things about Idealliance, and this comes from the top down from our CEO, Tim Beckley, who has installed in all of us to have an openness with our clients. We don't only give away our standards free and our materials free. I try as much to give my time free. So for those of you that have very technical questions or would like to learn more, things we can't cover today, you can contact me directly, and I absolutely promise to get back to you and help you as much as I can. Our Idealliance Europe page, every day we post webinars. Every week we have a podcast. This is the most popular podcast in the sector. We have interviews with the top people from around the globe, be it brand people telling their story about their journey into the brand world, or print professionals or color professionals. And as a bonus, actually, just yesterday, we established our YouTube channel. Now, I only had a moment to look at it this morning, and it's exceptional. Already we have webinars, we have tutorials, we have everything you need there. So please take a snapshot of this, and because there is so much material here that those of you with an interest in standardization in G7, this absolutely will be a good foundation for you. So that's my presentation, Ivana. So if I hope everybody could hear me well, and I believe there's a few questions now, or 5 minutes of questions, if I can help.